The old man raised his gun and aimed at the young man, but instead of pulling the trigger right away, he told him to take off all his clothes. The young man was completely baffled, but since the other man had a gun, he had no choice but to comply, even though he was reluctant. When he was down to just his underwear, the old man suddenly stopped him, then casually pointed in a direction and told him to keep walking that way. However, after only a few steps, the young man couldn't take it anymore, but the only response he got was, he didn't dare say another word and could only walk forward barefoot and naked, aimlessly. As he watched the young man walk farther and farther away, a strange smile appeared on the old man's face. He wasn't the least bit worried that the young man would reveal his secret of murder. The young man quickly realized that the old man simply didn't want to waste another bullet on him, intending to let him die of heat in the desert. But what the old man didn't expect was that, although the young man seemed to be wandering like a headless chicken, every step he took was actually calculated. When the old man picked up his binoculars to look, he saw that the young man, who had just been on the verge of collapse, was now running desperately in one direction, as if he'd been injected with adrenaline. The old man was surprised, but didn't care much, because in this godforsaken place, even if he had wings, he wouldn't be able to escape. However, the old man was quickly proven wrong. When he looked again, he saw the young man suddenly leap forward. He vanished into thin air on the vast, flat wilderness. After getting up, the young man didn't dare linger. Relying on memories from years ago, he quickly found a cave entrance. He hurriedly pushed aside the rocks and crawled in. Just as he was about to kick down the wooden stick supporting the entrance, he suddenly heard the old man driving a luxury car at high speed toward him. In this critical moment, he kicked hard and managed to collapse the entrance just before the old man arrived. But unexpectedly, the lingering smoke quickly caught the old man's attention. Calmly holding his gun, the old man stared at the cave entrance, just waiting for the young man to run out of air and crawl out. But what he didn't know was that there was a hidden chamber inside. This was a cave left by the young man's grandfather. The young man picked up a kettle, but there wasn't a single drop of water inside. Fortunately, he found a pair of shoes. Looking at his own feet, bloody and mangled, he gritted his teeth and forced them on despite the excruciating pain. Even better, he soon discovered a supply mat on the wall, left by his grandfather when he worked here as a tour guide. Looking at the photo of the two of them on the back of the map, the young man was overwhelmed with grief and swore to bring the old man to justice. But he had no time to mourn as he sensed a shadow outside the door. He quickly hid the map in his pants and then concealed himself. The person who came was indeed the old man, who had found the entrance and was now advancing step by step into the cave with a weapon in hand. At the critical moment, the young man managed to slip into a small hole in the wall just before the old man could spot him. However, the act of closing the door was still noticed by the old man. The cunning old man pretended not to notice, calling out the young man's name while lighting the gunpowder in his hand. He then threw it directly at the entrance of the hole, grabbed the box of explosives, and ran out.
Today, you can try that again.
Hearing the commotion, the young man crawled out. Danger imminent, he stomped, trying to put out the fire. However, the gunpowder was Chinese, and the more he stamped, the fiercer it burned. In this critical moment, he summoned strength and sprinted desperately. Just as he reached the hole's entrance, the next second, after the deafening explosion, Grandpa's cave was blown to pieces. Fortunately, the young man managed to survive by sheer luck. Seeing John standing right in front of him waiting, Jack instantly realized he had lost this game. But what he didn't expect was that, seeing Jack battered and bruised, John actually decided to give him another chance, letting him keep his shoes on and continue forward, just to see how long he could survive in this vast desert. Hearing this, Jack didn't dare stop walking, and could only stumble shakily into the distance. At this moment, John still had no idea that Jack was hiding Grandpa's map in his crotch. Soon following the map, he arrived at a cave, but inside there were only two shaggy sofas. Without time to think, the young man quickly tore out the sponge from the sofas and used it to pat his injured feet, then struggled to climb up through the cracks in the rocks. When John saw Jack had made it to the top of the mountain, he immediately drove after him in pursuit. At that moment, Jack was lucky enough to find one of his grandfather's marked spots on the map. After digging away the dirt on top, he discovered a box inside, which contained several steel balls and a slingshot. Without hesitation, Jack quickly took them and hurried toward the next marked location. To his surprise, he found a bucket there. Overjoyed, he quickly pulled the bucket out of the ground and ran to the side to drink greedily from it. However, just as he was enjoying his drink, a gunshot suddenly rang out, knocking his bucket to the ground. Another shot followed, completely spilling out all the water inside. Watching as his bucket was shot to pieces before his eyes, Jack was instantly overwhelmed with deep disappointment. He knew John wouldn't let him go, so he had no choice but to grit his teeth and press on despite the pain from his wounds. But because the weather was so hot, he soon couldn't hold on any longer and collapsed to the ground in a faint. Seeing Jack lying motionless on the ground, John gave up any hope for him and raised his gun to take aim at him. This is truly the highest level of playing dead. The young man lay face down on the 50-degree ground, pretending to be dead, but the old man chasing him had no intention of letting him go. He raised his shotgun and fired a shot right next to him. The young man was instantly terrified, but he didn't dare move a muscle. He was afraid the old man would realize he was just pretending to be dead. After confirming that the young man had indeed died from the heat, the old man picked up his shotgun, got in the car and left, because as long as the young man died from the heat, the old man's previous murder would never be discovered. However, what he didn't expect was that when he stopped the car to make a phone call, he suddenly saw that Jack was actually still alive, making his way toward the mountaintop not far away. This instantly made John furious. If he hadn't been worried about leaving evidence of murder earlier, he would have shot him already. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and started shooting at Jack on the mountain. Fortunately, because of the distance, every shot John fired missed its mark. Seeing Jack hide behind a large rock, John had no choice but to drive toward the foot of the mountain, while Jack was forced to desperately run toward the top. He had no choice but to desperately climb toward the top of the mountain. Finally, after using every ounce of his strength, he was lucky enough to discover a cave halfway up the mountain. Crawling into the cave, Jack was instantly stunned. He found that there was actually a pool of water inside. Driven mad with thirst, he scrambled over to the pool, but as he got closer, he realized there wasn't a single drop of water. What he had seen was just a hallucination. Soon, night fell. To prevent Jack from escaping under the cover of darkness, John simply turned on the car headlights and aimed them at the cave entrance, then sat by the car, waiting like a hunter by a rabbit hole. Because the temperature difference between day and night in the desert is so extreme, Jack, who had no clothes to wear, was instantly shivering from the cold. Just when he thought he was about to die, he noticed that water was actually seeping out of the pool. This was undoubtedly a lifeline for Jack. Soon, with the nourishment of the water, Jack regained some of his strength, and it was time for him to fight back. But going out through the main entrance of the cave would be suicide, so he had no choice but to climb out through an opening above his head. After crawling out of the cave, he saw that John was about to go to the bathroom. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Jack quickly slipped over to the car and found a jacket inside. But before he could even put the jacket on, John suddenly turned back, took out a bottle of alcohol, and was about to have a drink. At that moment, he suddenly noticed that the driver's side door was left slightly ajar, which made him instantly realize that Jack had escaped, so he immediately started the car, floored the gas pedal, and began reversing. Fortunately, Jack, who was behind the car, quickly dropped to the ground, narrowly avoiding disaster. But by now, John had already spotted him, and pressing harder on the accelerator, charged straight at him. In order to survive, Jack had no choice but to run for his life, quickly hiding behind a large rock. Jack thought he had just escaped danger, but to his surprise, John played dirty. He took a box of explosives from the car, lit the fuse, and threw it straight at him.
Fled and hid behind a large rock.
But John, a determined man, wasn't about to simply let it go. He quickly picked up his trusty shotgun, and without hesitation, fired several powerful shots directly at the imposing rock. Taking advantage of the moment while John was reloading his gun, Jack realized it was time to fight back. He rushed straight up to John and hit him on the forehead with a slingshot. A single steel ball knocked the aging John unconscious. When John woke up again, the story took a dramatic turn. He found himself tightly bound with rope by Jack. John never expected that he would end up being taken down by this kid. Seeing Jack leisurely eating breakfast outside, John was instantly struck by fear, because if the secret of his murder got out, his company would inevitably go bankrupt. In order to save his company, John offered to bribe Jack with $1 million, promising to pay him immediately as long as Jack didn't turn him into the police. However, Jack, who was full of integrity, had no interest in the money at all and quickly turned John into the police. Yet, just when Jack thought the crisis was finally over, he was surprised to discover that John was actually the richest man in the town. Sure enough. The next moment, the sound of a helicopter came from outside. Realizing something was wrong, Jack rushed out, only to find that the sheriff had really let John go. It seemed that John must have bribed the sheriff here. Watching the helicopter slowly rise into the sky, John knew there was nothing more he could do. However, the story doesn't end here. Because right after John flew away, Jack immediately went to find his girlfriend. But while the two were resting late at night, the door was suddenly and slowly opened by someone. It turned out John had come back for revenge. Fortunately, at that moment, Jack suddenly had a nightmare and woke up, just in time to see John appear at his girlfriend's house. John thought it was time to end this game, but to his surprise, the next second, Jack's girlfriend pulled a handgun from under the bed and shot John right in the shoulder. Seeing this, John tried to fight back desperately, but was ultimately taken down by Jack in self-defense. With that, the film comes to an end. This movie tells us that money isn't everything.